afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining the session today. As you're aware, we've invited both Tim Hurd and Andrew Whitehead to come and talk to us as a group. And this is on the back of a discussion we were having about neurodiversity more generally. And we thought it would be really useful to bring some experts in to talk to us about what neurodiversity really is, and make sure that we're sort of familiar with all aspects of it and how we can support employees with people who are neurodiverse. So it's an interactive session. So I think Tim and Andrew are likely to ask questions of us potentially to fuel that conversation. But hopefully it will be useful to us. Andrew and Tim provide occupational health services to us at GES, and so they have a wide remit really, but this is something that I know a lot of us are interested in understanding more about. So with that, I'll hand you over to Tim, I believe.
Thanks, Kat. So I'm Tim Hurd. Thanks so much for inviting me to speak to you today. My background's in occupational health and well-being, and I've been doing this job now for around about 20 odd years. I have a background in psychology, occupational psychology, and I label myself as a business psychologist, and have been really passionate over the last 5 to 10 years about educating organisations about mental health and well-being. My interest in neurodiversity came around, I've always been interested in it because it's part of the makeup of an individual's psychological well-being, but somebody asked me to go and look for a neurodiversity partner for us to work with, because as an occupational health service, we frequently get asked questions, is somebody has X, Y, and Z, what do I do with this? So that's what it piqued my interest in terms of I need to understand a bit more about neurodiversity. It's certainly a hot topic. We're seeing it more and more in organisations, and we're seeing it more and more in the press. For example, there was a programme on ADHD last week on Panorama, and what I'm really wary of is navigating the landscape in terms of how you support your employees within organisations. Where are your boundaries? What should you do? What shouldn't you do? What have you already got that you're unaware of that actually helps to really build on the rich tapestry of neurodiversity we've got within our organisations already? And how do we support those people who might be struggling with certain elements of their role because of a challenge associated with their cognitive abilities? In terms of what we do today, I'm happy to have this as conversational. I have got some slides to talk to, but I'm going to try and keep it conversational at first. If not, I'll roll out the slides to you guys. So just before I start, what does neurodiversity mean to you? What does that word mean? Does anyone want to have a go? Because I thought that neurodiversity meant autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, Tourette's syndrome. But as I've started to learn a little bit more about it, neurodiversity actually encompasses us all. Yeah, we all have strengths and weaknesses in terms of our cognitive abilities. So diversity actually sits amongst all of us. We are all neurodiverse in this room, in this virtual room today. But what it's become synonymous with is actually conditions where there is a cognitive deficit. So you've heard words like neurodevelopmental conditions. What are the words? The word that I prefer to use now is neurominority, which is a minority of those of us who are who have deficits in certain cognitive skills, which are associated with specific conditions. But we also have people who are neurotypical. And neurotypical is we have a average or above average ability in all of our cognitive areas. And I will start to share my slides because I'm already diverging from those slides. Let me just share.
Tim, can I ask a question while you're looking?
Yeah, one
of your things that you mentioned was you used the term neurodeficit, was that?
Yes, okay.
And I often think that neurodiversity cognitively is a whole wide range of things.
Yeah.
If somebody has a neurodiverse, I don't know what the right term to use, but say a neurodiverse condition that is way above what those neurotypical norms are.
Yeah.
So they don't particularly have a deficit, but they almost have a superpower, right?
Yes.
And sometimes that superpower is not recognized because it doesn't sit within what is deemed as typical. And I think they can also be considered almost to be an outcast if other people truly don't understand how to help that individual utilize that strength, right? Because it's a learning difference, I think. So,
absolutely. And then you've sort of moved me on to my next slide. So thank you so much. That's really helpful. Is that we all have, you know, I haven't got a neurodiversity condition. However, Andrew said that, I am neurodiverse. Well, I am. If you look at my profile, and this is my profile, and I did this through a screening tool through one of the providers that I found, and this tells me where my cognitive strengths and weaknesses are. So if you look across the board there, I have some what you would say superpowers. We need to be really careful with language here because somebody, for example, with autism, there is an expectation they have superpowers in terms of analytical skills and problem solving, whereas actually we're all different. So these profiles are different for each and every individual. If you look at mine, you can sort of see what task you should or shouldn't give me. You shouldn't get me to organize anything. Yeah. If you get me to organize anything, the wheels will fall off, or I will get incredibly stressed. Just ask my wife. She asked me to organize anything, and I will start to get really, really stressed. I find it very difficult. However, I have some, let's say, superpowers, some strengths in my cognitive profile. My social interaction. You can throw me into a room of people, and I'm happy to go and speak to anyone. I'm happy to stand up in front of you guys and talk about neurodiversity. I use that to almost cover up my cognitive deficit. So I always go and make friends with somebody in the office so that they can organize my day. But what we need to understand is we are all different. What we find with neurotypicals is that this line is a very flat line. Yeah, so we'll always be around about average or above average. However, with a neurominority, we're going to have some spikes that are under average or very, very low. So you get somebody with a very spiky, they call it a spiky profile. But the direction we're moving now in with neurodiversity is that we need to really look at the positives, and we need to use the skills that somebody has to help them to learn some coping strategies to help with their deficits. And in terms of prevalence across the population, we have around about 15 to 20% of the population who would have a condition that we would call neurodiverse. 5% ADHD. 1 to 2% of the population is diagnosed with autism or on the autistic spectrum disorder. 10% are dyslexic. So there's a huge amount of our workforce who are struggling with the written word, struggling with reading, understanding written text. Dyspraxia we'll talk about in a minute. That's again to do with coordination. But we also have 5% of the population with acquired brain injury who would mimic the cognitive deficits you would see in a neurominority condition. What we're going to focus on now for the next few minutes is on understanding what these conditions are and what the strengths and weaknesses that we might have with a neurodiverse condition.
Tim, before you move on, can I ask a question, please? It's Katrina.
No,
I'm from RCNI, and just going back to your slide where you did your spiky profile.
Yeah.
Can I just understand? Are you're neurotypical? You're not neurodiverse?
Yes.
It's just one of the things. I'm my mother of a daughter who has Asperger's, ADHD, dyspraxia, dysgraphia. I could go on.
Yep.
One of the things you say everybody's different. One of the things I really think needs to be made clear is that people who are neurodivergent, actually their brains are wired differently.
Yes.
Oh, not just different. It's absolutely just not the same.
Yes.
So a spiky profile for you and a spiky profile for an ND person, we're not all the same. We're not. It's very, very different.
Absolutely, and somebody with autism, might have a very different profile with the person next to them with autism. So you don't know where their strengths and weaknesses are going to be. It's a very individual thing.
Yeah.
And I think we make assumptions and we stereotype somebody with ADHD or autism without really understanding that individual. We need to understand the individual and what they need, especially at work, in terms of what they need to support their working day.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Quite often we find neurodiverse conditions sitting alongside each other. So as you said, somebody who has autism also has ADHD, also have dyslexia. And the journey I've been over the last few months is there's a bit of a diagnostic journey that somebody might go on. They might go for a diagnosis for ADHD, and out of there comes a recommendation to go and have an assessment for autism and then for dyslexia. And that journey, in my opinion, and this is where I'm going with this, is we're at the moment, I feel as though we are looking for problems rather than looking at the solutions to neurodiverse conditions within the workplace. And just to help you understand that a little bit more, I'll share the next slide. Because what we find is that regardless of the condition, and then this comes from one of the providers that I'm working closely with, is the coaching that they put in place, regardless of whether it's autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia, 92% of those, the coaching focuses on memory and concentration, helping somebody to focus on a task. 82% of that is organizational skills, 78% is time management, and 67% is communication skills. From what we're seeing is actually there's some fairly practical skills that we can put in place to support somebody with a neurodiversity condition, to support those weaknesses or challenges in their cognitive skills, and enhance them to support their coping skills, so that they are able to cope with these challenges that they have in their working day. Does that make sense before I move on to the next slide? Has anyone got any questions? Yeah. Okay, so I called this
Jim, just sorry, we can't see your screen at the moment, or at least I can't. So it's gone black for some reason. Sorry.
Okay, let me stop sharing, and I will try again. Thank you for letting me know. I can't see the screen, so I will try again. Let me see. Just let me know if you can see that now. Is that working? black, Tim?
No.
Yeah, we'll try it one more time. I just love technology. Let's do that. It won't let me do that. It's not going to work, is it? Still can't see it. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I still talk to the slides. So I'm going to talk about PAs. So I'm talking about autism and ADHD. Autism is stereotypically we look at some of the struggles that somebody might have with autistic spectrum disorder is struggling to communicate, understand social nuances, and we very much focus on the weaknesses of somebody with autism. You know, can become stuck in detail, the minutiae of a task, difficulty in understanding non-specific instruction, so giving somebody an instruction and not interpreting that in the right way, not understanding verbal communication, but also there's a sensory aspect to typical autism spectrum disorder is that being overstimulated by the environment, you know, becoming stressed with noise, with distractions and sensory distractions such as lighting, smells around them, but also reading things like body language, facial expressions, nuances. Office banter is a challenge for somebody typically with autism. Reading between the lines is really difficult, and you know, it can come across as rude, you know, overstepping social boundaries, bringing home life into work inappropriately. But what we don't focus on is strengths, and we know that with a spiky profile, somebody with autism is going to have a huge amount of strengths. You know, alertness, ability to hyper-focus, passion, enthusiasm, attention to detail, strong analytical skills. And what we're finding is that organizations are missing out on employees who have these exceptional skills. You know, we have recruitment processes that are actually excluding people from the recruitment process. You know, I look at things like assessment centers. You know, if you're holding assessment centers for a problem-solving analytical role, well, what you're doing is you're potentially overlooking some real talent out there in the market. Because somebody with autism isn't going to excel in a social interactive situation. We need to look at our advertising, the way that we hold our recruitment, so that we are more inclusive with somebody with a potential neurodiversity condition. And we, you know, just moving on to ADHD, you know, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. What do we usually see in somebody with ADHD is they might talk too much. They have a lack of attention to detail. They get easily distracted by things around them. That sort of magpie effect. They're always distracted by something more interesting than the tasks that they're on. Relationship difficulties can come across as rude. Terrible time management skills, and an inability to organize themselves. You know, time management, frequently late to meetings, not turning up to meetings at all, double booking themselves. They're the challenges that you might have with somebody with ADHD, but there's a huge amount of strengths that we're again, that I think in the past we've been overlooking. You know, modern workplaces are really, it goes back to the Industrial Revolution in terms of how we developed, you know, a role for individuals. Is this is a role and everyone needs to fit into it. You know, that we're really applying it to a neurotypical population. what we're finding is that, especially since COVID, is actually we can be more flexible with our workplaces. We can look at different approaches to solve the same problem. ADHD, somebody with ADHD quite often has a huge amount of passion and enthusiasm. Well, why is that? Because they are hyper focused on things that they are interested in, and have amazing creativity and problem solving abilities, will be able to think outside the box, won't follow process because they have come up with a better way of doing it. And when in that hyper focused mode, it's like a mode that somebody with ADHD goes into, has incredible attention to detail. And we know that someone with ADHD can handle change, likes change, embraces change, can't wait for the next challenge in their life to actually keep their attention. So what we're finding quite frequently with neurodiversity is that we're overlooking the strengths and really focusing on the challenges. And I think that's certainly something that I'm seeing, having being immersed in neurodiversity over the last 12 months, is actually we're looking at a strengths-based model rather than a weakness-based model. Does that make sense? Has anyone got any questions at the moment before I move on to the D's of neurodiversity?
I just have a real quick question. This may not necessarily be directed at you, Tim, but when I think about our industry as a whole, okay, I'm wondering how many people who are neurodivergent actually openly will declare that they have a neurodivergent condition, which typically would mean if we're unaware of it, it's difficult to actually support an individual. One of the things I'm trying to do at Informa is obviously to create that right environment that will hopefully bring more people forward to say that they're ADHD or autistic. But I think it's a real challenge at the moment. And whilst I want to be able to kind of create greater awareness and understanding, and hopefully understand how we can better support individuals, sometimes it can be difficult to do so. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Would you openly encourage people to really kind of share? I know some people want to keep these things personal and quiet, but
it's very similar to the journey we've been on with mental health, I think. 20 years ago, I'd go into an HR team and say, I want to talk to your managers about stress, and I'd be asked to leave the room. It's a frightening topic. I think we've come a long way since then. I've now done thousands and thousands of mental health awareness sessions with leaders, and we're embracing that. Does that mean that we've come to the end of that journey? No, I don't think so. There's still stigma out there associated with mental health, and certainly the same applies to neurodiversity. I think people are scared of judgment. People think it might limit their progression, and actually people will think that people will focus on their challenges rather than their strengths. I think we also need to be careful about the culture around neurodiversity and pigeonholing people. So we can't just pigeonhole a whole team of people who are autistic because it's an analytical problem-solving task. We need to have a diverse team so that we embrace all neurotypes within a team. I work best with people who are incredibly organized. Well, you've looked at my profile. That's why, because it's patching over where I need help. However, they might need help with creativity. I'm happy to throw ideas around all day long, but I never finish a task because I can't organize myself. So we need that rich tapestry of neurodiversity within each and every team. We can't just pigeonhole people. I'm probably going around the answer. Yeah, we need to be encouraging a culture of openness and authenticity. I went to listening to some experts talk about mental health within organizations and neurodiversity is we need to encourage a culture of authenticity within our workplace. Bring your whole self to work. Well, why is that? Because it's less stressful. You'll get people more engaged and feel as though they're belonging to an organization. And we know how much return on investment you get is if you have engaged employees who are bringing their true self to work. It will improve their well-being and you will get much more productivity out of an individual. Just quickly going to touch on the D's of it just helps me organize them, if I'm honest. The D's of neurodiversity, and I'm going to talk about dyslexia. You know, somebody with dyslexia is going to have challenges with, you know, phonological awareness, verbal memory, processing verbal information. We know that dyslexia sits across a range of intellectual abilities. You know, probably when I was at school, there was unidentified people with dyslexia who were having challenge with their work at school because they weren't identified at an early age. Thankfully, my children now, I know that these conditions are identified at a very early age, and that there is no impact on intellectual abilities. It is across the continuum. Dyspraxia stands for developmental coordination disorder, affects people's movement, motor skills, can impact all sorts of areas of their daily life. I know one of my family is dyspraxic and prone to things like tripping, falling, bumping into people. I just used to think she was clumsy, but no, she's now been diagnosed with challenges with dyspraxia, and will have challenges with things like typing, drawing, and can affect things like short-term memory and ability to plan and organize their skills. We go back to those the coping strategies. You know, a lot of this goes back to actually planning and organizing skills which we can coach into people. And then just finally, we'll talk about, there isn't another one, but we'll talk about dyscalculia, which is similar to dyslexia, but we're talking about numbers here. The ability to acquire mathematical skills, and for some people, they struggle to see numbers in the same way that somebody who is neurotypical might. Difficult to read symbols, trouble understanding finances, and just using numbers in their everyday life. What we do also know is that somebody with dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia is also going to have a spiky profile, and they're going to have other strengths within their cognitive skills that we should look to enhance and embrace within the workplace. So I've talked about now, you know, the neuro minority. What's the impact to you as an organization, or you as organizations, is how can you start to make a more neuro-inclusive organization? Well, simple steps. You know, certainly from an occupational health perspective, we get managers calling our service and saying, okay, so we think somebody has or they have been diagnosed with autism, and they're finding that they're really distracted. Well, there are some easy steps here to put in place. We can remove those distractions. We can look at, you know, a quiet part of the office. We can look at home working. We can look at flexible working, shifting their slides so that they're working more on their own than when the office is busy. We look at practical solutions, you know, shorter meetings, additional breaks. You know, somebody with autism might find it difficult having a 4-hour meeting where they're socially interacting with people for that length of time. Well, let's have some consideration for somebody who might be neurodiverse and have additional breaks within that. Some with ADHD might get distracted and not listen to somebody for 4 hours talking in front of them. So let's consider reasonable adjustments to our normal working practices that actually are more neuro-inclusive. Additional training, coaching. If there's any L&D departments out there, go and look what you've got on your platforms already, or there is free awareness training for things like neurodiversity, for the conditions that I've talked about today. There might be time management skills, organizational skills, communication skills, packages that you already roll out to your staff and that you have within your existing infrastructure. IT, I look at the reports that I get back from specialist neurodiversity providers, and half of the solutions come in the form of IT solutions. Read-write software, so software that you can get your documents to read into your headphones. Read through processes so that you hear them verbally rather than looking at them on the screen. A lot of this is already in Office 365. Go and have a look at the accessibility options that you've got within your existing IT packages and trial them first with somebody with dyslexia to see if that will help them manage their day-to-day work. If not, there are specialist IT packages that you might want to have a look at to support that individual. Look at what they need and they are asking for, and see if there's any practical solutions that you can put in place. Look at your recruitment policies. See if they are neuro-inclusive. Look at your job adverts. See if there's anything that you can do to speak in plain English when you are recruiting for particular roles. Sometimes I look at have job adverts, and as what I would say is fairly neurotypical and fairly good at reading. I don't know what they're asking for. So look at how you can adapt your policies and your processes to be more neuro-inclusive.
Question for you, Tim. Earlier on, you when you showed that kind of chart, the spiky chart, you said you were neurotypical. How did you get assessed for that? Because one of the things I'm thinking of, I did read something that at least 9 out of 10 people have some kind of neurodivergent condition.
Yeah.
But how easy is it to kind of have that type of assessment just to understand where you are on those scales? Because I think if a whole organization went through something similar and they understood where they were, you could organize meetings so much better in terms of knowing where the individual's strengths lie and how you can then utilize a team or an individual to really kind of deliver to their best ability.
Yeah, great question. You've moved right to the end of.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Let's use it as a conversational piece. That was a screening tool off one of the providers that I found. That I think it costs somewhere between £30 and £40. It took me about 20 minutes to fill out. And it screened me for a range of different cognitive abilities based on my self-report. I was honest with it, and it told me what I already know is I can't organise anything. But you're right, it identifies strengths and weaknesses within an individual, which means you can tailor your support as a leader to facilitate those challenges that an individual might have. So yeah, around about 34, I see it as a great entry into identifying what sort of what sort of a neurodiverse population you've got within your organization. And I certainly see that as a first step. Where I think we're going wrong at the moment is that we're looking for diagnoses before we support an individual. So we're going through exhaustive diagnostic assessments, which are costing, I don't know whether you watched the Panorama program last week. You can spend about 650 quid, and within an hour you can get an ADHD diagnosis. How legitimate that is, well, I would question it. I would question the competency of the people that are diagnosing those conditions. And I think there are some risks associated with prescribing quite risky medication to somebody with ADHD if you haven't been through a full diagnostic process. NHS, I think, takes about 4 or 5 hours. But what we're looking at the moment is we should be putting the support in place for everybody rather than going through exhaustive diagnostic procedures. Organizations don't have any obligation to diagnose people, but you do have a duty of care towards your employees to support them at work. So yeah, in answer to your question, yeah, I think small, short, sharp screening tools are going to be the way forward, and we shouldn't be looking at expensive. And the ones I look at the moment are around about £1,200–1,500 to diagnose that individual, with the providers that I'm looking at the moment. But we should also look at what we got. Yeah, have we got anything within our existing IT structure? You know, can we support that individual with time management, with organizational skills, with diary management, with mentoring? You know, go back to how did we used to train and develop people years ago? We used to put somebody with a mentor, with a coach, and you used to support them in their learning journey to get to the point where they felt comfortable with their role. I don't think we necessarily do that with our new starters through our onboarding processes. Again, that's organization by organization. And looking at that support available, well, what is out there in the market? Well, you can go and get diagnostic assessments. I can find you a provider that can turn that around in around about 4 to 6 weeks. We can have screening assessments. So some of the better providers I'm looking at do sort of diagnostic screening assessments, but they look at all areas of neurodiversity as part of that screening. So you look at all of the A's and the D's, and you get a likelihood of somebody having one of those conditions. It's not a pure diagnostic assessment, but if you're looking at going down that route, that's what I would probably recommend based on my experience over the last 12 months. The thing I'm really attracted to is specialist coaching measures. So where we went to with mental health was actually putting supportive services in rather than diagnostic services. And we looked at things like cognitive behavioral therapy as a support for mental health problems. Well, if we apply the same principles for neurodiverse conditions, well, coaching is a really good tool. As part of my recent learning journey, you know, I've been implementing coaching within our organization, and it's an incredibly powerful tool to help people with performance management. You know, one-to-one coaching with individuals, it's amazing how 3 or 4 sessions can get somebody to a point where they're underperforming to performing. But specialist neurodiversity coaching can really start to enhance those skills where somebody might have some challenges within their cognitive abilities. Technology we've talked about. Look at your existing IT suite. What have you got that you can use and implement to support somebody with a neurodiverse condition? And I think going back to the question about people coming forward and disclosing that they have a neurodiverse condition, is I would highly recommend awareness campaigns. Yeah, so getting experts in to come and talk to you about neurodiversity, to dispel the myths, so focusing on the negatives, and to start talking about the positives associated with neurodiversity. Yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say, so I love what you're saying, and a lot of that for me applies to within an organization and the employees that, you know, that we have. Given that we are, you know, an event organizers with, you know, event venues, etc., who run lots of big shows, who have a lot of attendees will come. And I think some of the challenge there is, you know, how can we ensure that we are supporting visitors to the shows that have a neurodiverse condition of some sort? What do you think we could actually do to bring that attention either to visitors that basically says, look, if you need help, this is where you can come to and we can support you? Is there anything like that you can recommend? Oh,
that's a difficult question.
That was all done. I just asked on his behalf.
I mean, I'm happy to talk to you separately outside of this conversation. I've left my details on the well, you can't see the last slide. I'll send it out. But I think, yeah, there's certainly there would be some stuff that you can do to make it more neuro inclusive. I remember going to an event a few weeks ago, and it had headphones, and I thought that was brilliant for some neurotypes. Yeah, so somebody with ADHD might be focused, they've got their heads, they've got no other distractions around me. For me, I thought it was brilliant. However, for somebody with autism, it didn't quite work so well. So whatever you do, you're probably going to impact somebody else. So I think it's about having a range of different accessibility options to support what we know. Sorry, go on.
To interrupt, it's Katrina again, RCNI. I just wanted to say, Mike, I'm an event organizer, and as I said, my daughter has a few of these things. One of the things I think that could work really well within an event is quiet space. The thing is, whether they're diagnosed or undiagnosed, the things are still going to be happening. So ADHD, autism, it's about them getting overwhelmed, overstimulated. So areas where it's quiet, where they can just go away. You don't have to make it an ND area, but any kind of like quiet space is always appreciated, I think, by most people at the event. Generally, I would say events, exhibitions, conferences are quite overwhelming for ND people, but if you can get that space for people to go to just to have 10-15 minutes if it does get too much. Other things, freebies, stress balls, they're great. People love those. They're two things that popped to mind that I just thought you might be interested.
It's funny, we've been talking about sensory rooms.
Yeah.
Quiet rooms with soft lighting, maybe piping in certain aromas into there, or just gentle music.
The aromas is a funny one because people can get very sensitive to smells.
Yeah.
And, anyway.
There's so many ideas out there. It's just like, what do you do? And then, as Tim mentioned, if you do something that could be very appealing to one set of people, then you could be impacting a different set as well. So this is quite a challenge in our business.
Absolutely. And something you probably need to think about quite carefully to make it more inclusive. The other thing that there are organizations that do workplace needs assessment. So if you do have a challenge with an employee within your organization, they can work out what needs that individual requires. Again, I'd recommend specialist providers for that, or go through your occupational health department to understand what that might need. But don't forget access to work. Access to work, if somebody is diagnosed, you have a supportive service out there that you can access, and it will help with funding for a lot of the recommendations that come out the back of these assessments. I think what I would start to develop is a neurodiversity policy as a starting place. Work out what you reasonably can put in place for your employees, also I suppose your customers. I didn't think about that when I was building this pack, so I missed the trick there. I just think about what you feel as though is reasonable to support, and I would start in a stepped approach. So look at what you can do to support somebody within your existing infrastructure. That would be the starting place. Then look at screening assessments, so such as the one that I've been through, which are inexpensive but spit out some really, really interesting recommendations to provide that individual and the business with coping strategies. And as you move on, maybe then start to look at specialist neurodiversity coaching for specific cases where those simple steps don't work, and all the way up to employing specialist neurodiversity organizations when you come across those particularly challenging situations. The only just one last thing before I I stop talking, is if you do have any of your employees that need specific qualifications and you need to go through sort of training academies, apprenticeships, you might have to go down that diagnostic journey before you can get the support in place that they need, such as, you know, universities, for example, they need a diagnosis before you get the extra time within your examination period. So just be careful. That one caveat to my, I wouldn't support spending huge amounts of money on diagnostic services. That's the one caveat to that. Look, I'm happy to answer any questions. If anyone's got anything that they want to ask me, feel free to do so.
That was amazing, Tim. I'm not sure if I've exited here. No, I haven't. That was amazing, Tim. Really, really interesting. I'm just wondering, in terms of diagnosis, etc., is there any, you know, the testing that you did, the analysis? I'm really interested in that part and how we can access that sort of thing. But I agree with you, just to try and be very mindful of all of these different conditions and be considerate to that in a more general way. I think that's really what's resonated with me. But I'd love to know, you know, if we have concerns or people are struggling with certain things. I mean, often when you were talking, there were a number of things that occurred to me that I thought, wow, you're talking about a good percentage of our employees that struggle with some of these things, but there's no formal diagnosis or we're not aware of it. So and you recognize traits within yourself as well and start to think maybe you know, I may be slightly you know, slightly diverse, but
well, we are all diverse, I think.
Yeah.
Trying to get across, neurodiversity is actually, it's about the rich tapestry of cognitive skills that we've all got. We all have strengths and weaknesses. Well, we know that, but it's just a slightly different way about looking at it. But also, how do we make our organization, our structure, our policies, our processes more inclusive for everyone? Because actually, it'll actually help us all have a better working day.
And in terms of support, as you say, some of the associations and things that support people with different conditions. So as an employer, we could approach some of those associations and say, we have a handful of people that are struggling with X. Can you support us in terms of what we can offer to them? And you think that maybe, you know, some of the charities or whatever they are, potentially could help in terms of tools and things like that, and offering us support in terms of what's available? Or
there's loads out there. There's a few organisations that I'm speaking to about supporting our clients. I've been following Professor Nancy Doyle and her blog for some time, and a lot of the words that I've used today I've stolen from her. She speaks incredibly passionate about neurodiversity. Her organisation, Genius Within, is very focused on the positive aspects of neurodiversity. And she's a great believer in we shouldn't be looking at identifying the problem. We should be looking at solutions for us all, because actually that will help the neuro minorities by being a more inclusive organisation anyway. It fixes the problem. We go straight to solution rather than, I think we're in a mode of problem identification, trying to find people with autism, with ADHD. Look, I understand and I appreciate, and I've spoken to many people who would like a reason for why they are struggling. And that's why they want the diagnostic label. However, you are not obliged as an organisation to go down that route. You should be looking to support everyone. Yeah.
thank you.
Good. Any more questions? Anything that I haven't covered that you think I should have done?
So if we, are you able to send the slides across to us, Tim, the ones that you shared? Because it is quite useful to reference things. That would be good. And then in terms of contact information, presumably your details are on there, that so if people do want to reach out to you directly for further details or support or whatever, then that will be on that presentation, I presume. Yeah,
it's on the last slide. That's fine. I'll send them across to you guys. As I said, if you want to have a separate conversation, I'm very happy to do so. Just let me know. And also anything else that you want to ask me about mental health and well-being. Got a huge amount of experience in managing awareness programs across organisations. So feel free to ask me any of those questions as well.
That's amazing. I think it's been a really, really useful session, one of our better sessions personally. I just found I've got a lot from it. So hopefully the others have too. I've seen some nods and seen some comments in the chat. So I think it's been a success from our perspective. But it's just thought-provoking, as I think Zinnia said, and just makes you stop and think. So that's what we all need to do. So no, we really appreciate it. Is there any questions for anyone else before we wrap up? I think this session was just dedicated to this, and I think we've got other separate events arranged. So if that's it, then we'll give everybody a little bit of time back.